What up, everybody in Brookago? Thank you so much for coming back. We just had a wonderful break. Thank you to our wonderful folks over from the Pathless and Annapurna Interactive for sharing their wonderful words about all that good stuff that they're putting out into the world. But that's not what we're here for right now. We have a fantastic, amazing guest rocking with us. This week, I am super excited. I have been hoping, I have lit candles. I have said words of encouragement to the world. I have put down lots of different good. I lit incense to make this interview happen, and we're finally getting it done. I'm super excited to bring on Corporate Vice President of Gaming Ecosystems at Microsoft. Sarah Bond is rocking with us here in Brookago. Sarah, thank you so much for coming to the show today. I'm super excited to have you. Welcome to Spawn on Me into Brookago.
Thank you. I don't know if you give that intro for everybody, but you have me laughing. Your prayers are answered.
I am an honest soul. I keep it 200. I don't lie. I have no reason to lie. But I am infinitely excited to have you on the show. I remember seeing you on stage at E3. It was me, my boy Paris Lilly from Gamertag Radio. We were sitting in the seats. And you come up on stage, and literally all of the folks in the room, we were like, wait a minute, we don't know who this person is. Who is this person that just rocked up on stage? And why don't we know about her? Because she's talking about all these things that we care about in the gaming space, and especially during the Xbox conference. I looked up some of your information, and I was like, wow, we have to figure out a way to get Sarah on the show at some point. Because one, a part of our show, of course, we know we talk about diversity and inclusion. We talk about spotlighting people of color in the gaming industry, and having someone so high up in the Microsoft and Xbox company being on stage, being a part of our community was something that I remember when I rolled up on you later on that day. I saw you're coming out of coming back from backstage, and I went over to introduce myself.
The showcase. You tracked me down at the Bethesda showcase.
I did. It was at the Bethesda showcase, and I was like, oh my God, I have to go say hello and introduce myself, because at some point would love to get you on the show. And it was nice to be able to share that one moment where we talked a little bit about, that moment being very special, not only for me personally, but for like all the folks who care about this in this way, and have been trying to do the work of showcasing and sharing amazing folks doing this work in that space. I'm again super excited to have you rocking with us. How are you doing? That is a really long intro to get to how you're doing, but how are you? How have you been? How's everything going?
Some things are going great, and some things are going just okay, and some things are just not awesome right now. I mean, it's been 10 months. I just can't believe it. Like the first couple months, I thought, okay, I can get through this. It's going to be 3 months. We can stay motivated. And now this is our world. And there's all sorts of other uncertainty going on. And, it's a lot. I'll be honest, it's a lot. And one of the things that kind of keeps me focused, well, two things. One is my kids, who actually say that this is the funnest time they've ever had, because I'm home a lot. We got them a trampoline. They have infinite Legos to play. We're doing all these things to keep them entertained and engaged. They get to play more video games than ever now. I used to ration it a little bit before. Now it's like, sure, go ahead. And two, just the work that I get to do, it's like, I loved gaming, before this. I've loved it for years, but just the fact that we get to be one of the ways that people can connect right now when things are so tough is very motivating. I know it's actually helping a lot of people, and so those are the two bright spots for me through all of this, is just to get to spend time with my kids, and also to get to help others connect across the world.
I'm actually really happy to hear you say that, because I think for a lot of folks who aren't necessarily gamers, who don't really understand why gaming is so important to so many, it is really nice to hear just that sentiment of saying, like, this is a thing that is helping people get through this really troubling and difficult time. It is extremely hard for folks to be able to find spaces to get out of their brain and figure out ways to be able to talk to people and across the country and across the world through the games that we play. Is that a thing that you and your other colleagues are kind of talking about as well, when you're kind of thinking about the greater scope of what happens with COVID and how it's kind of affecting the world in that way?
Yeah, I mean, we talk about it all the time. It's just like it's always been a lot of what like our philosophy, our sense of kind of the core of Xbox is the fact that the gaming is the only media form where you can connect with somebody else's achievement. You can actually accomplish something together. And it doesn't matter what country you're in, it doesn't matter what language you speak, it doesn't matter what you look like, if you're male, female, gender, religion. All of those things can melt away and you can actually do something with somebody. And that's always been a big part of our core. And now, it's not necessarily safe. It's not necessarily safe at all to have your friend go play with his friend down the street, especially now that it's resurging, and a lot of things that we felt a little more comfortable doing in the summer, we're kind of second guessing ourselves now and saying maybe not. And this is a safe way for people to connect. And so it is really encouraging. Like one of the number one things we saw as people were going into lockdown was people gaming more, but importantly, people actually gaming more with their friends, more online gaming, more connected gaming. And that gives us just a lot of joy to see that happening.
Yeah, it is definitely keeping me sane at this point. Like I've run out of hobbies. I've run out of breads to bake. I don't know what else to do in that space. So I'm like, everybody's either making masks or breaking bread or farming at this point, and I'm just like, I've done all those things already, and I'm not doing any more of those. So I will go back to gaming.
I'm just gonna boot up your game.
Yeah, seriously, no doubt. I want to go back a little bit because I think a lot of folks who aren't familiar with you or familiar with their work, they have seen you in those Xbox showcases, but they might not have necessarily gotten a good idea of like who Sarah is and how long you've been in this space. And you talked about gaming, prior to you being a part of Xbox, and I'm curious about that. Like, what were your gaming experiences before you moved over to the Xbox side of things?
So gaming was a big part of how I grew up. My dad is actually a big gamer to this day. There's some cool pictures of him with his gaming rig and his setup. So it's one of the things I always did as a kid. I started out with King's Quest 2. GoldenEye was pretty much college weekend for me when I was in college. Obviously, I had a Game Boy and did all that stuff too. In the Sega and did all of that. And then, Xbox became part of my life as I got older. And then when I had kids, I actually just stopped playing for a bit. I'll be honest. Like I read this stuff that said you got to be careful with the kids, and I stopped playing for a bit. But then when the opportunity to join Xbox came up, it kind of clicked for me. I'd spent my whole career working in consumer tech. I'd done a bunch of different things across my career. And this was just like this amazing part of Microsoft and consumer tech that I had never been a part of. And so I just jumped on the opportunity to get to do it.
Yeah. I mean, it is interesting how things wind up becoming full circle, right? Where, you've done it as a hobby, and then now it's become a part of your career. And it's kind of grown into the thing that you maybe, at least right now, more known for than some of the other positions you've held. I kind of lends to the question of, you have the title of CVP of gaming ecosystem at Microsoft. What does that actually entail? I think for the folks at home who are like, one day I want my child to be the CVP of gaming ecosystem.
Like, I want to run ecosystem. What's ecosystem?
What does that actually mean for the people who are at home? Yeah, seriously.
Yeah. So look, we talk a lot about at Xbox how we put the player at the center of everything that we do. But the reality is that the players want to play games. And so what my team is responsible for, what we do is we put the developer at the center of everything that we do to make sure that developers can have success on the Xbox platform. And frankly, on any platform. We actually have tools that are agnostic to Xbox that we provide to developers. So that goes from all the tooling that they use, how they publish their title with us, what the economic agreements are we have together, how they work with us on Game Pass, how they work with us on Azure. My team drives all of that across Microsoft. So it's a pretty awesome job. It's global too, which is also one of my favorite parts of it. I have teams in Japan and in Europe and in the US because we're reaching out and working with developers all around the world every day.
Yeah, I think one of the...
So I make game creators' dreams true, basically. I make game creators' dreams true.
That is a title in and of itself, actually. I'm like surprised that is not the actual like title that you... like, I make game devs' dreams come true. This is what I do every day.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting, too, because I remember very specifically, maybe this was like 5 or 6 years ago. I was in a room at GDC Phil Spencer walks in. He has this big chart that was like this big kind of almost a spider chart. There was just like all these pinpoints kind of going all these different directions, talking about what Xbox is trying to do in the future. xCloud was a part of that conversation during that initial conversation. And then we see, fast forward 6 to 7 years. And now all those things are kind of coming to fruition in big ways, right? You see with the Xbox Series S and Xbox Series X, you see with xCloud as a part of the conversation. When you started to hear that those things were really starting to kind of move forward and really gain some momentum and steam, what were the conversations that were kind of happening within the company? Was this like a, oh crap, we're really going to do this kind of moment? Or was this like, oh man, we're really about to do this. This is going to be a lot of work, and we may not necessarily know how to make this become a real thing. What was the conversations that were happening during that time when you were like pushing forward and moving these kind of things in that direction?
One of the greatest parts about being part of Microsoft is that Microsoft loves gaming.
Yeah.
We're one of the fastest growth areas. We're, the flagship consumer business of Microsoft. So really, the conversations were of like enormous amount of support. Like when we panned way back and we looked at what we thought was going to happen in gaming over the next 10 years, we said, look, there's 3 assets you're going to need to succeed. You're going to need content, you're going to need community, and you're going to need a cloud, because you're going to need to be able to make gaming ubiquitous across devices. And then we said, well, who has all those things? We looked at all the players of the industry and we said, okay, we have all those things. Nobody else does. Other people have bits and pieces. You do have Tencent that has that, but they really are focused on China. And so we have a really unique opportunity here. So it wasn't so much like, oh my gosh, there's so much work to do. It was more like, oh my gosh, there's such a huge opportunity for us to deliver something for players and for developers that no one else in the industry have to do this. It's almost like it's a quest of ours to do this because it's going to make gaming better. And the amount of support that we've gotten across Microsoft, we partner with the Azure team really deeply in all the things we do. You look at all the acquisitions and the investment in content we've been able to make over the last couple of years, right? We're continuing to grow our community. It's all been an enormous amount of support like from the top to drive everything that we've been achieving. And frankly, like I was reflecting, even as I'm sitting in my base the last 8 months, all of the things we've gotten like really come to fruition and we've gotten to execute in 2020, like all of these things that we have been talking about for 3 years that we've been building towards, launching the console, hitting huge milestones with Game Pass, launching xCloud, like it's all out there now, right? And now we're just scaling it and bringing more and more players in. And that's the fun part, frankly.
Yeah, it's been pretty monumental to see, because even I was skeptical when I had that conversation or was in that room with Phil, and I was like, all right, Phil, I understand that this is going to be what you're going to do. And you're like, can you really like make this a thing? Like because there were, again, like at that moment in time, there were still like some kind of messaging issues around, the way that the ecosystem was going to kind of work. You're coming off the heels of 360 and moving into the Xbox One space, and then, trying to still figure out what the box is going to be and how everything's going to kind of work together. I feel like right now, of anybody in the space, Microsoft has figured out and has brilliantly kind of messaged out how different this ecosystem is going to be going forward. And that to me is one of the things that is the most exciting, is because you're not asking people to buy the box. You're saying, yeah, we want you to do that. We want you to do that part of it. But there's a whole bunch of systems here that you can be involved in to game the way you want. And I think that has been extremely interesting to see that from a huge company like this. What have been some of the surprises that you've kind of come to see kind of moving in that direction? Has it been a thing where you've seen multiple people who maybe weren't necessarily in the fold kind of come to the fold and say like, oh, wow, this is what I'm actually been looking for?
It's hard to identify a surprise exactly, just because so much of what we've done has been listening to players and developers and crafting, each and every single of the things that we brought together around that feedback. And so it was a very iterative learning process. It sounds like some of which you got to participate in, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Right? About understanding how important content is to folks. Doing a ton of work to lower the barriers to entry into the ecosystem, right? By designing, Xbox Series X with its really attractive price point, by creating Xbox All Access, which means you can get in with a subscription. The way we created Game Pass was very like player research led. Like we learned that people wanted discovery. They wanted an easy way to find games. They wanted curation. They wanted affordability. So we designed around that. And so I guess if you were to say a surprise or a pleasant one is that, sometimes you design things based off of feedback from your customers, and you get, exactly what you projected and expected. The thing I love is that everything that we've gotten back from customers was beyond what, their enthusiasm, their love for what we've created is beyond that, right? Like we really clearly hit a vein, sometimes and that's what's really, really lovely. And just the feedback from them and the demand for what we do. And then it's just enabled us to lean even further into it and to just do more things that accelerate.
Yeah, it has been really cool to see this thinking outside the box in these huge ways. It has made my job a lot easier as I don't even know what the heck I do, right? Influencer, press guy, all those things combined, right? Like it has made my job infinitely easier to not only find games to play, but also to be able to jump between different platforms and say like, well, oh, if I don't want to play it here, I can still play it here and still get a phenomenal experience and feel like all those things are kind of coming together and coalescing in that way. Is it a thing now where even with the initial kind of multi-pronged strategy of just like, console, PC as a platform, now even mobile in that conversation, that it feels like even the ways you're talking to developers is changing in that way, I'm sure, in terms of like them being able to now think and expand what they feel like are capabilities that they're able to do?
Yeah, it has. It's completely different. Yeah. I mean, even when we talk to them about the next generation, like we do every time we launch a generation, we go out and we actually have discussions with all the developers and we show them what we were going to do. And in the past generations, the discussion was really around the console and the speeds and feeds and the technical capability. And this time it was about that, but that as a part of a whole bunch of things that we were doing to actually be able to bring more gamers into our ecosystem, bring gaming to people who never would have experienced gaming before, and enable them to engage and just experience new things. Like when you really step back, there are 3 billion gamers on the planet. There were 2 billion last year. We just hit 3.
Wow.
Right? But there's about 200 million people who will ever buy a console. And that, it's for some people, it's a huge barrier economically, right? It's not how they want to play, but many, many people actually want to play these types of games. And so it's a lot of our conversation with developers, like how do we make it possible for you to create one instance of your game, one platform, one single code base, but have it be playable across a whole span of devices powered by the cloud. And that for them is really eye-opening, right? Because if you have to manage the mobile instance of your game, PC instance of the game, the 2 versions of a console instance of your game, communities are all split apart. No developer wants that. No player wants that, honestly, right? And so our whole vision is like, how do we make it as easy as possible? What I love about that, frankly, is it helps smaller developers succeed. Right now, right, the only ones who do all those different instances of games are big developers who can afford to spin up each one of these things or pay a partner or maintain all these code bases and backend services. And if you're a smaller developer with an IP that wants to break out, it's super hard.
Yeah.
We just want to make it easy. It's like democratize access to players and to be able to reach them on the devices they own.
Yeah. I mean, even from dev friends that I know who have been talking about the possibilities of launching their game or trying to figure out ways to, broaden out, how many people are actually going to be able to get their thing in front of, the ideas that you all have kind of implemented and are kind of pushing forward automatically just seem infinitely helpful to everyone who's in that ecosystem. I think from the consumer side of things, Game Pass has been one of the biggest kind of boons that I've seen come into the space in a very long time, for not only for the consumer, but for the company too, to say like, we're giving you a lot of value here at a reasonable price, at an affordable space, and giving you so much more than you can think of. I know you had a huge hand in kind of getting that thing off the ground. It was a thing that you talked about probably in your first initial kind of like, coming out to the world when you were on stage at E3 of talking about Game Pass and Game Pass Ultimate. How has Game Pass been for folks? Has it felt like this was the kind of linchpin for a lot of the things and initiatives that you've seen kind of going forward? Was it everyone knows it's successful, but has it been something that everyone is like, oh my goodness, this really worked in the way that we hoped it would?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it worked better than the way we hoped it would, honestly, if I were to be frank with you. Like I said, we designed it based off of player feedback. But there's nothing like actually launching a product and seeing how it performs in the market. Like, you can't predict everything.
Yeah.
And one of the big fears, frankly, many folks had, and a lot of developers had early on in our conversations with them about joining Game Pass, was that Game Pass was actually going to devalue games, right? That it was going to shrink the gaming industry. And what we found was actually the exact opposite happen. That because games are fundamentally a community-driven thing, right? That you play with other people, that when you open it up and you make it possible for people to play a game who they otherwise wouldn't have bought, that it actually drives more engagement and it drives more monetization. So we do a bunch of studies, we look at it every which way, and we see on average, a developer that puts their game in Game Pass sees the engagement go up by 6 times when that happens. Wow. 6 times. Can you imagine?
Wow.
And then we look at it from the player perspective too, and we see that we compare players before and after they subscribe to Game Pass, and their engagement goes up. They play 20% more time. They play 30% more games. But my favorite stat is they play 40% more genres. Because what had been happening in our industry, when you're looking at buying a game for $60, $70, for most people, that doesn't mean you can buy many games each year. So you buy what you know, the big brand names, the next instance of a franchise, right? And you just kind of stick with that because the wallet is limited. But that when we offer people Game Pass and they're paying $10 a month, they're like, I'm going to try that game. That looks good. I'm going to download it. I'm going to try it out. Then they discover, suddenly I like this type of game that I'd never played before. Mm-hmm. So we had this one game that I love. I talk about it a lot because I love it. I'm stuck on a level. If you ever want to try and help me out, Human Fall Flat.
Oh, yes.
And 60% of people who play Human Fall Flat in Game Pass had never played a puzzle game before, ever, anywhere on our platform. And that's, that's huge. But you say, okay, people are going to try new things. But then 40% of those people went on and bought another puzzle game. And that delights me. Like, that brings me so much joy. Because these people were puzzle game players. They just didn't even know it until they had Game Pass. Mm-hmm. And so all of those things, just seeing that flywheel spin up, once we actually put it in the hands of players, we had a suspicion that would happen, but it was one of the most delightful and best parts of launching the program.
Yeah, I mean, it is one of those things, and I say it often enough when people ask me, a lot of folks who are kind of like either gaming adjacent or, I'm often the encyclopedia of knowledge for people who are say, Kahlief, my nephew wants X. What should I do? And I'm like, first of all, go on the internet because I'm not the person to tell you everything. But I often always will reference Game Pass as like the thing that you should wind up snagging because it just offers so many ways for you to kind of dig into stuff. I know specifically for myself, there were games that I would have never tried if it wasn't free on Game Pass. I would have never touched it because I was just like, I'm not going to spend money on this. And I'm not going to bug PR for a code for this thing because it's not a genre that I care about. And I found some pretty great some gems in there that were like really fun things to be able to take some time with and play. And I think that has been pretty interesting to see how that's happened. I think honestly, and tell me if I'm right, that the console space is great for that in that way. But I think the PC space has really done well in terms of Game Pass being on it, because I feel like even there, especially, there are even more technical barriers that come to play when it comes to will my game run on this thing? And, with the gear that I have, is that going to be a thing? Have you seen a lot of growth in the PC space too?
Yeah, we have. We launched, that's what I did at E3. I guess it's now over a year and a half ago now, is we launched Game Pass on PC. So we see a lot of growth on PC, and we also see players who are playing across both, which we also love. And so that has been a big part of our success with Game Pass.
Yeah, I am infinitely more excited about, because I know a lot of people. There's like two camps right now. They're just like cross play or cross save, and for me, cross save is the future. Like cross save is the thing that
Oh,
I
it's
want to
huge.
see implemented into every
Yeah.
single cross gen, cross platform title in that space. So having that be a part of the way the systems work has always been something I've really been thankful for, because I game in multiple places, so I'm always moving around in the house or I'm playing in different places,
Mhm.
and so having that be in there is has been really good. Launch has been pretty fantastic. I would assume. I think, from the folks that I'm seeing online, everybody and their mama was very excited to get their Xbox Series X or S in their homes. Are the folks in the mothership really excited about kind of how launch has gone so far?
Yeah, it's been awesome. I mean,
Yeah,
everyone feels that this has been our best launch ever. Both, the consumer reception has just been incredible. It's honestly humbling to see people just so excited about your product. Like we're all really humbled by that. The response from developers has also been incredible about the partnership, about their ability to use the tools and get on the platform. We've launched with more titles that on Series X and S than we ever had, over 3,000 playable titles, which is just also an incredible moment. So you can normally, you get in there and it's a little sparse, not at all in this case.
yeah.
So overall, we just feel thrilled about it and just can't wait to keep executing and delighting more players with what we've created. It's just a great, great start to the generation for us. And to do it in 40 countries too, which by the way is one of my things that I really was excited to see us champion was global. That gaming is global. It's about connecting people. It's about bringing them together. The fact that we were able to do that in the midst of the pandemic, on top of everything else that we were managing, is another thing that just makes me incredibly proud to be part
Yeah.
of the team. It's been awesome.
Yeah, it's been very impressive. I mean, it is. I've watched. God, I've been gaming since I was 4. I'm 42 now at this point, so I've seen a fair amount of launches, and this has been really, really good. It feels like
Mhm.
everything, not even just from the kind of usual avenues in which things have kind of moved, and the marketing, the marketing has been fantastic this cycle,
Mhm.
especially, which has been really good to see. But it feels like, especially during this time, that this, at least the initial launch, was a really great moment just to see so many people happy. And that was the thing that it
Mhm.
really did a lot for my soul in a weird way. Because it's like, we're not going to conferences. I'm not getting to see all my gaming industry friends. We're like doing all these Zoom calls all the time. But it was so nice to be able to see so many people across the world, across all my circles, get that box in their hands, hook it up for the first time, turn it on, and be excited about something this year. About that, great job to you all, and kudos for making that happen, and bringing some joy to people's spaces and lives during this maddening time. It was really good to see, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things I wanted to talk about, I want to pivot a little bit, because I think we've had some interactions before. We did a really great stream with the IGDAF Foundation a little bit earlier in the year, where we gave our friend Laura Teclamariam the Jerry Lawson Award, and you presented that to her during that time, and we had some conversations a little bit about what it means to be in this space, and being at the kind of top of the game in lots of different ways. One of the reasons that I wanted to bring you on was to talk a little bit about what's it been like to be in this space as one of the head black women in gaming. I think it's been something that a lot of folks that in my circles, they look up to you. They're like, this is Sarah's a role model. Sarah's a fantastic person to emulate the work that she's done in this space. Are you hearing conversations about this stuff when you're like kind of in circles with the public, or with the consumer base in any of this way? Like, of course, DNI has been a huge part of this conversation for a while, and I feel like people are more willing to say like, hey, I see what you're doing and I appreciate what you're doing, and keep rocking and keep doing what you're doing. Have you heard a lot of those conversations in the past couple of years?
Yeah, I really have. I a couple years ago, um, I really started to think about like why did I go to work? Like
Yeah.
what was it? Like it's not just about money, but like why do you get up every day and go out and do what you do? And especially the time I was traveling a lot. My kids are really young.
Yeah.
And I realized I do go to make the world better for the people who come after us. Like that is actually my core motivation. And there are times, in gaming and in tech overall, like I look left, I look right, and I'm like, well, I can't punch out because there's nobody else here who looks like me.
Yeah.
And I don't want that to be the case when my daughter walks out or when my son walks out or when others do and they don't see anyone who looks like them. Like I can make it better for the people who come next and just like carve a little path. If you're okay with it, it was interesting you started with your view of the E3 story. I would love to tell you my version of it.
Absolutely, please.
And what it was like for me.
Yeah.
So the way we put together those shows is, we have rehearsals. First, we have them here at headquarters, and you're kind of just doing almost like a read through, and there's a screen where you watch the assets, and you're kind of trying to decide the order and all these things. It actually wasn't really clear who was going to do that section.
Huh.
And then, and originally Phil was slated to do that section. And then he said, no, I think you should do it because your team did so much to make PC GamePass possible. And I learned that 2 weeks before the show. So I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? What am I going to wear? Oh my gosh. Like I was panicking. And people said to me, they said, if, it's a lot to go out there. Like you're putting yourself out there. There are people who might target you. You might see comments about you on social media that you're not going to like. Like, are you sure you're ready for this? And I really thought about that. And I thought, no, I'm going to do it. Like, I'm going to do it. This is an amazing opportunity to represent my team, represent my people. But then when we go down to LA, which is where it was, I miss those times.
Yeah, right.
And there's like 3 days of rehearsal running up to it. And people who had been working that show for years came up to me and they said, we never thought we would see this moment. To have someone who's Black go out on this stage as a representative from Microsoft, this really means something. And people were crying, they were tearing up, and I really hit me the enormity of what I was about to do. Like I kind of conceptually understood it, but I didn't fully understand it, and I started to get like I'm going to let everyone down, like I was school panicked. And then I had this moment of calm and I realized that like panic was a selfish act. Like to get nervous was Sarah. But when I was going out, I was not Sarah. I was every woman. I was every girl. I was everyone who was told no, right? I was representing my team. I was representing doubters. And there is no nerves when you're all of those things. And I walked out and I'll tell you, I was not nervous. Like it's like even when I watch the video to this day, it's like an out of body experience. I'm like, who is she? She looks great. It doesn't seem like. And I do the first segment, and I don't know if you remember, there was a video that played in the middle, and I just have to stand there. I'm like, I have not yet made a mistake. I think I got this. Now I'm going to bring it home. That it's all included at no additional charge, and it's going to be great. And I finish it. I walk off stage, and they had mic'd me kind of in the middle of my back.
Yeah.
Couldn't see it with all my clothes and stuff, and so they decided to take it off in the curtains because they had to like lift up my shirt and everything. And they go to take it off, and the woman who takes it off, and I literally collapsed into tears on this woman. Like I'm bawling my eyes out in the curtains. And she said, why are you crying? And I said, because it was good and I didn't let anybody down.
Yeah.
And then I could be me. And all of the emotions that I had managed to just make go away, I allowed back. Because in the end, like I'm an introvert, if you can believe it. Like in the end, I just did it in the service of others because it had to be done. Like that ceiling had to be broken.
Yeah. I raised my introvert flag with you. I am as well. And thank you for sharing that. I think there's always this interesting conversation that happens when I have guests on and we have a lot of firsts, right? And also as a show that talks about this in a real way, I'm always torn to ask the question because it always feels rote in some ways, where it's just like,
Mhm.
you know, how's it feel to be the black person at the thing? And I'm like, yeah, I know, and we all know, right? We all know what that feeling is, to be able to do that. But it is a thing that I wanted to thank you for, because there's pressure. There's always pressure. And it's not like just when that stage moment happened that there was pressure for you, I'm sure. I'm sure in every room that you've ever walked into that there's been pressure for yourself, for everybody else, for, you know, for all the things that go along with that. And to hear you share that, it means a lot, because it was a very special moment. Not only for I'm sure for you in that moment, we're getting through it, but it was a thing that when we left that room, we were like, that was the thing that made all of that day worth it, was to be able to see you on that stage representing all the things that you represent in such style and such grace, and knocking it out of the park and doing it in the way that you did. So thank you for that. And it also brings me to a part of the conversation that's about not only that moment, which was very special and amazing, but it's a great thing to see that you have a team backing you that was like, Sarah, do this, because it's a thing that should be done. I want to talk a little bit about that from the company perspective, because I think that is a very important thing. I'm doing some of that work at the company I work with over at Intel. And we're having a lot of those conversations often about, like, how do we want this message to be out in the world? How do we want to think about this in bigger ways? What ways can we knock down ceilings and doors, right? Having that be a fundamental thing within Microsoft, and especially in the Xbox group. Talk a little bit about, like, why that has been so important, because I feel like it makes everything, we say this often, it makes everything better, right? There's nothing that it doesn't touch that it makes better. But I'd love to hear your thoughts about what that means from a person who's on the inside, seeing it every day, and working with folks, and sharing those stories and sharing those moments and triumphs together. You know, what are the kinds of conversations like for you working out there, and what does D&I mean in the Microsoft Xbox space?
Yeah, you know, Microsoft and Xbox is the first place I've ever worked where it was even okay to talk about D&I. Like, it was even okay to say, God, I feel uncomfortable about this in this moment, or I don't, you know, something feels biased to me. And it is the first place I've ever worked where I do feel like I am accepted as Sarah, like, warts and all, you know, like, in all of the imperfections. And I think that is, I mean, it's enormously, it's a relief in a lot of ways. Like, I think I've done my best work here, because I'm not carrying, I mean, we all carry it, but I'm not carrying as much of it, and I'm not carrying it alone. Like, I'll tell you another actual story about E3 related to this. I'd forgotten about this until you just mentioned it. But during rehearsal, like, we work on what outfit we're going to wear. And so sometimes, you know, let's say you do 2 takes, we'll do 2 or 3 runs a day, and you'll try different outfits so they can kind of see how we're the light and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so I didn't have my backstage credentials on because I had changed. And Matt Moody and I were backstage, and we were like, oh, well, we really want to go front stage and just see how it looks from there before we have to go on. So we walk up the stairs, and we're going around to go front stage, and we're going to go through the door, and a bouncer stops me, and he's maybe 6'5", you know, not bouncer, I guess security is better, right? All in his gear. He goes, stop, and he puts his hand right in my face.
What?
And for me, frankly, immediately kind of went to a fight or flight response, which I think is based in being a Black woman in America, to be honest. Like, I froze. You know, I wasn't able to verbally say, no, I'm actually one of the people on stage, everything. But Matt was standing next to me, and he didn't leave me there. You know, and like, he said, wait a second, explain. Let's just get the person to come back and tell you who you are. And I mean, that meant a lot. Like, I wasn't alone.
Yeah.
You know, I was shaking. Afterwards, I was still shaking, and my next tape was terrible. It was like my worst one. Like, I forgot all my lines. Or, you know, like, what happened to Sarah? Like, I'm still like this. Like, oh my gosh, I just got threatened by this. But you know, it's like those little moments where I think Matt totally understood how it felt for me,
Yeah.
and he was just staying with me as a colleague and all of that stuff. Like, that matters.
Yeah.
And so I do have the feeling like, we're not perfect. I think we're all wrestling with it. I think we have a long way to go.
Yeah.
But just being in a safe space with people who care about you, who see you as a human being, who recognize that we have our differences, but those are strengths and not weaknesses, that is so, so valuable. And I would say to everyone who listens, is like, find an environment that's like that, because that's when you're going to have the most joy. You're going to do your best work. None of us should have to work in an environment that is any different than that.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, and I'm sorry you had to go through that. Those things always, it's such an interesting thing because we all have had that moment, and it's an interesting thing about Blackness too, which is we are not a monolith, but we have these interesting just like through lines that happen as experiences and conversations and things that are kind of like imbued within the culture that we have because of outside forces and because of racism, because of discrimination, because of all those things. And we have figured out ways to battle through and still be successful and still figure out ways to persevere in all those ways.
The thing is too, and I want to emphasize this.
Yeah.
The security guy actually was doing his job.
Right.
He didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't have my credentials on. He was told to stop everyone who didn't have credentials on.
Yeah. Yeah.
So but it was more that for how it felt for me.
Right.
Was so different than how it would feel for Matt.
Yep.
Right. And that the understanding, our mutual understanding actually of each other's perspective in the situation is actually what was powerful. That it's okay, it's actually good for more than one perspective to exist in the same space, because then we can see more.
Yeah.
And I think that frankly is what is so insidious about, racism or discrimination and divisions, that it hides us off from each other.
Yeah.
Right. It says my view can only be true if your view is not true. But the reality is that you have to bring them together and find the commonality, right? That is kind of like what you're trying to do with diversity inclusion. You're saying, I want many different types to come together and accept each other as they are and see the value in each other as they are. And that's hard work. And I think it's just like a lot of barriers that have built up structurally and culturally for us to figure out how to do that and not see it as combative, but actually see it as almost like the greatest act of love that you can have in the world.
Yeah.
Is to love what you do not understand.
Yeah. Yeah. It is hard work. It is some of the hardest work. It is some of the hardest work that folks who dig into this will do, because it is strife with so many different things. I know my own triggers. I know my own barriers. I know things that'll set me off, and as opposed to things that I know I'm just like, oh yeah, like that person was just doing their job. Maybe that wasn't racism. Maybe that was just that person doing what they were supposed to be doing. And you have to then think about the constructs that everybody's kind of moving around in, and taking that one step back to say like, all right, let me ground myself for a hot second and analyze that in a way that speaks to all that stuff. But the interesting part is like, you have to do it that fast in the moment, which is the interesting part. And some people are better equipped to do that than others because of their life experiences. So it is, thank you for that. That was a beautiful way to put that, because I think it is the crux of what this work is and why it is so important. And I'm happy to hear that Xbox is fostering a place where that can live. It is a rare thing that I hear from many people in not only the gaming industry, but industries across all different vectors and segments, of like not having the ability to be them in the spaces that they occupy when they're at their 9-to-5 jobs or, their actual work jobs. So hearing that Xbox is doing that and has that as a fundamental thing gives me lots of hope and lots of pride to kind of say that we've done work with them in that space before. So that gives me a lot of happiness there. Because we're almost running out of time. And and I wish I could keep you here for like another hour. But I'd love for you to share, just one thing that you would kind of give to folks in the space who are thinking about, because the gaming industry is an interesting space. It is unlike anything else that I've ever been in. But I think for folks who are in our spaces, a lot of the conversation is always kind of revolved around like access and finding out good ways to meet people who can be mentors, or to find places to feel like you can be safe in some of those spaces and work your way through the industry up into it. Through your experiences and people that you've kind of spoken to, like if you were to give someone some advice about like ways to navigate this space in a good way for them, everyone's different, but what would you share with people to kind of like get them in a good space to kind of start the work, or at least to be able to feel like they can do that work and be themselves and find good places to kind of do that work?
It's a complicated web often, but
Yeah.
there is nothing better than developing your network and mentors consistently over time.
Yeah.
It's something, there's a lot of research that says it's something that people who are underrepresented tend to have a harder time doing. And so it means you have to overinvest, but it means it overly pays back for you. So that's my number one piece of advice. And really know your product and your customer. That would be another one. Like know what problem you're trying to solve, and who you're trying to work with. Like make your idea really solve something for someone. Is a second piece I would say, and play, right? I mean, in this industry, like get your hands in there, like really figure it out. And those would be the three things. And don't give up. Like this is the media form of the future. I think people are starting to realize that. Last I looked, it was the second highest form of media right after TV, but growing about twice as fast. That was pre-pandemic. So I bet you now. It's the media form of the next generation. And we almost have to get involved. Again, back to that purpose of like, why do you do it every day? What do you want your kids to see, right? What do you want interactive media to do? And it's most powerful because I think it generates more empathy. And so I think there's opportunity for an immense amount of impact by being engaged in shaping what it is. So.
Yeah. Well, Sarah, I have to say, when I lit those candles and incense a year and some change ago, hoping to snag you to be on our show, this is exactly the conversation I was hoping to have. And I hope that we can continue to have you back on the show. We consider folks when they come through to rock with us as fam. We want to see them grow. We want to continue to see them prosper and do all the wonderful things they do. And I want to again thank you for continuing to inspire, continuing to give us a person who we can say like this person is doing it, and you can't deny that these things are real, and that this one individual is like making it happen in this space, and we can figure out good ways to do that work too. I'm infinitely inspired by you, and you continue to drive me to be better at the job that I do in this small space. So thank you for rocking with us, for coming onto the show and hanging out with us for the time that we had you here. And hopefully, I will help you with whatever games you need. Let's get on some games and play some stuff and find some time to hang out and do that work too. So again, thank you so much for rocking with us here in Brookago. And we hope to have you back soon.
Well, thank you. Honestly, it's an honor to be part of it. Thank you for lighting those candles and incense and whatever you did. Like, this is fun. 45 minutes went like that. So just thank you for having me, and don't shortchange yourself. What you are doing is incredible too.
Thank you.
Honestly, I admire what you're doing, and you keep with it. And we're all doing it together. Like, it's a team effort.
Thank you again. I really do appreciate that. It is always one of those things where I look back and I'm just like, my God, those 7 years went by really quick. I was like, that was a long time. That thing happened real fast. But yeah, again, we'll be poking back in through the proper channels to see if we can snag you to come back on later in the year, maybe, in 2021. Lots of conversations are going to be happening for Xbox and all the folks over at Microsoft there. So we'd love to have you back and talk about more of the wonderful things that are happening over at Xbox coming up soon. So everybody at home, that is our show for this week. Again, thank you to Sarah for rocking with us. We have lots of cool stuff coming up for the rest of the week. We also have our NFL streams that are coming up soon. Again, thank you a huge bunch to the wonderful folks over at Annapurna for rocking with us and sponsoring our show this week. And yeah, we'll see you all very, very soon here in Brookago. Much love to you all. We'll see you all soon. Peace.